Greetings to all in the love and light of the one infinite creator, and welcome to the 11th episode of the Seattle Law of One podcast. The title of today's episode is War and Peace. At the time of this recording in September 2024, there is yet another big war going on in the part of the world known as the Middle East. Why does this particular part of the world always seem to be at war? Why have we always had so much war on this planet in general? And how, if ever, will we actually see world peace become a reality? Let's find out. My name is Jonathan Tong, and I'm facilitator for the Seattle Law of One study group. We can be found on the list of study groups on the L&L Research website shown on your screen. We do also have a Facebook group, and we do meet twice a week on Zoom, Tuesdays from 3 to 5 p.m., Saturdays from 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific time. If you want to join, you can contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com. We'll put you on our mailing list, and we send out weekly updates to let you know what we're doing that week, along with the Zoom links. We do also have a YouTube channel where we have recordings of previous podcasts, as well as Q&As with Jim McCarty, Austin Bean, Tricia Bean, and Austin Bridges of the L&L Research Channeling team. Again, you can contact us at seattlelawofone@gmail.com to get on our mailing list to join any of those Q&As. You don't have to live in Seattle or anywhere near Seattle to join our group. Anyone who's interested and available is welcome to join. If you're watching any of these on TV, they are divided into chapters, so you can skip by chapters if you don't want to watch the whole thing from beginning to end. If you're watching on computer, you should see a list of topics and timestamps below. You can just click on the timestamps also to skip topics as suits your interest. As mentioned, the topic for today is War and Peace, and that's what the episode is about. Let's go ahead and meet our panelists. Panelists, if you let our viewers know who you are and where you're calling from, that would be great. Starting with Renat.
Hello, my name is Renat. I'm calling from Israel, talking about the war.
Nice. So great to have you here. And Grace?
Hello, everyone. My name is Grace Rude, and I'm calling from South Florida. So happy to be here.
So happy to have you here. And Michael?
Hi, I'm Michael Reichsnyder, calling from Southgate, Michigan, and yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here.
Nice. It's a joy to have you all here, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation today. Did want to give a reminder to our viewers that none of us here are experts or authorities on the law of one or the history of war in the Middle East. We are basically four normal people like you, just trying to make sense out of all of this stuff from a law of one perspective. Anything we say could be wrong. You are welcome to disagree with anything or everything that anyone here says today. So let's get started. Today we're going to do things a little bit differently. Instead of a bunch of passages from a bunch of different channeling sessions, we're really going to read through two different sessions that are specifically about war in the Middle East, coming from the entity known as Quo. If you're already familiar with the Law of One and the entity known as Quo, you might want to go ahead, skip ahead a few chapters to the chapter on Mars in the Middle East. If you are new to the Law of One, here are a few things that you should probably know in order to put that weird statement I just made in context. First of all, as far as what is the Law of One, you could think of the Law of One as a set of spiritual teachings based on the understanding that all is one and that one thing is love. All of these spiritual teachings have come to us through a process known as channeling. You can think of channeling as a form of telepathic communication between humans and entities such as angelic beings, extraterrestrial beings, spirits of deceased, higher self, inner planes entities, etc. A channel basically serves as a mouthpiece for other entities to speak through. And in this case, the entities that we're speaking through would appear to be extraterrestrial entities. There's two main forms of channeling used by the L&L Research Channeling team. Trance channeling is when the channel is in a trance state, subconscious or unconscious, as if asleep. They are not aware of what's being said. This is how the raw contact came about. Conscious channeling is when the channel is in a conscious but in deep meditative state, meaning they are somewhat aware of what is being said. This is how contact with Quo has been made. So who is Quo? You could say that Quo is a group entity made up of three social memory complexes: Ra at sixth density, Latwi at fifth density, and Hatan at fourth density. What is a social memory complex? You could think of it as a planetary consciousness. It would be as if the entire human population of Earth was merged into one mind. What are densities? You can think of densities as different levels of spiritual evolution or consciousness. You can see that humans are at third density, a higher level of evolution or consciousness than plants and animals, which in turn have a higher level of evolution or consciousness than the elements of earth, fire, water, and air. Similarly, you could say fourth, fifth, and sixth densities are higher levels of evolution or consciousness beyond where we're at now. Fourth density is where social memory complexes first form, and that is apparently our next step in spiritual evolution. So in order to graduate or make the leap from third density to fourth density, you have to make a choice between service to others or service to self. Meaning, in terms of the service to others path, you have to learn how to transcend those instincts for survival of self and your family or tribe, and actually care more about others than yourself, even if only a little bit, like maybe 51% more. It's really about awareness of the creator in yourself and in others for the service to others path, or just the creator in yourself if you are on the service to self path. But it really does come down to a choice of whether you want to live in a world of love and peace and unity, or fear and war and separateness. It really is pretty much that simple. Quo, first contact with Quo was made by the LNL Research Channeling Team in 1986, almost 2 years after the end of the Ra contact in 1984. And they have been channeled every month since then up to the present day by the LNL Research Channeling Team. You can find transcripts of those sessions in the LNL Conscious Channeling Library at the LNL Research page shown at the beginning of our podcast today. So let's go ahead and take a look at some passages here. The first question I want to look at is, yes, Mars in the Middle East. Believe it or not, to understand the history of war in the Middle East, it would help to understand the history of our neighboring planet known as Mars. On March 21st, 2006, Quo said, "We shall tell you a story about a series of populations that arrives at Earth for the purpose of joining in the experience of sharing third density with those few people who actually graduated as natives from second density Earth to the third density Earth. The first and largest of these populations was that of Mars. The entities of Mars had made some decisions in the practice of governments upon their planet, which resulted in the nature of the surface of their planet changing from a planet which was relatively hospitable to third density and physical vehicles to a planet which was not at all hospitable to third density vehicles. They were not able to finish the cycle of the density of choice in third density upon Mars. The guardians of this planet went before the Council of Saturn and asked for permission to move that population to Earth. The second density vehicles available for physical use upon planet Earth at that time were late second density great ape bodies, which the guardians felt might be improved by articulating facial features a bit more carefully, by altering the set of the body so it would be able to stand upright, and by improving the dexterity of the physical vehicle, especially in the hands, and by creating a larger capacity within the mind that came with that biological species. In essence, they created a new and improved great ape body, which looked a good deal like the one you are now enjoying. The guardians at that time found, within the space of several hundred of your years, that they had made what they considered an error in creating the new and improved version of the great ape body used by the denizens from Mars, and therefore thereafter used by entering souls from planet Earth or from elsewhere, simply because it was indeed a new and improved physical vehicle that looked like it would be handier to use to the entering souls and their guidance systems. The guardian's mistake was in creating better physical vehicle with the attitude that these physical vehicles were better and that the people that inhabited those physical vehicles were special. Naturally, the Guardians were very fond of the incoming population and felt great love for them as they were placing them carefully and gently upon planet Earth to take up again their search for love. What they did not anticipate was that the people themselves would feel that they were special. They were aware that their intellect was more powerful than other great ape species that inhabited the Earth at that time. They felt privileged and special, and they created with themselves an attitude of better than. The energy of the beings from the red planet was naturally somewhat progressive and fiery. I'm thinking that word might be mistranslated from aggressive rather than progressive. They go on to say they had demonstrated this aggression, this ability to wage war on their home planet, and had succeeded in destroying the surface of it as an acceptable environment for third density life. They carried these biases with them into third density upon this planet. The very beginning of your cycle of third density upon planet Earth was nearly 76,000 of your years ago by your counting. The Martian population incarnated in what you would call the Middle East and parts of Africa first, their thickest area of population in that area of the planet. Gradually, they became the populations that you now know as the Muslims, the Jewish people, the Palestinians, and others of Middle Eastern heritage. As the population settled in and began their cycles of reincarnation to gain experience and learn the lessons of love, they spread out, becoming the populations that you know now as the Russian and Eastern Orthodox churches, the Christian Church, and the Christian Protestant Church, as opposed to the Christian Roman Catholic Church. All of these populations are heavily larded with those originally from Mars. So bear in mind that everything that we just read came through that process of channeling that we discussed. The person who was saying these words was in a really deep meditative state and really was not aware of the words that were coming out of their mouths so much. They were just trying to make telepathic contact with this entity that identified itself with Quo. And we're just pulling one word at a time, whatever words seemed to come to them. They had no idea where one sentence was going to lead or one paragraph was going to lead. So it is really fascinating to imagine how this all came about. I guess to me, the big takeaway lesson from this was that apparently apparently Mars was populated long ago, but because of war and bellicosity, they ended up making their planet uninhabitable, and that population was genetically modified and transplanted to planet Earth. The Guardians that they're referring to, we are going to spend another episode looking way closer at the history of Mars and other planets that had similar fates. We are going to have another episode taking a look at the Guardians and the Council of Saturn. Those are really complicated things that we don't really want to get into right now. Suffice it to say, Guardians are what you could refer to as inner planes entities. They are like guardians of this planet. So the inner planes just refers to metaphysical world that is beyond our ability to see. Outer planes would be in the physical world that we can see. The Council of Saturn, then you could say, is also a set of inner planes entities, which are like guardians, not just of this planet, but of kind of like this whole solar system. Any other thoughts, reflections on this? We're not, that's a whole lot of stuff to take in. What do you make out of all of this?
I had two thoughts. First is that this phrase, informal phrase better than, is kind of, it starts the idea of hierarchy and separation. So it's, the problem starts there. It's like a seed that was planted, and I don't quite know, what was the meaning of the Guardians. Surely not the idea of separation, and how it was translated by the Martians to something that became separation, and separation leads to hostility and war and all that. So that was one thing. And Also regarding Mars, I can't remember where I read it, but in the LL Research website, I believe that to begin with, Mars was the planet of Mars was not as rich and hospitable as planet Earth, if I remember correctly. And if I remember correctly, the anger and hostility of the inhabitants influenced the planet, and which is part of the reason our planet Earth, is now suffering the anger that has been accumulated here for millennia. So those are the thoughts that came to mind when you read that.
Yeah, it does seem kind of naive to think that they could transplant the population from Mars that like destroyed their planet through war, transplant them to Earth and not have some sort of residual carryover from that. But the word naive appears many, many times in the history of the Confederation on Earth. So I guess this would be another example. Grace, any thoughts, reflections on this?
For me, my mind immediately went to the improved vehicles and how we can kind of we see these themes in our society today, perhaps with races that kind of are older races that fit that older blueprint of human, and how we look at that and we say, wait, we don't want that. I kind of see that taking place in our societal structure. So I that actually brought a lot of clarity to me that this is like a deep thing that happened, and it happened from this naivety. Um, it also makes sense that this population was, they are now populated in this very specific area where we do see all of these conflicts, where we see them in the societal structure making perhaps similar mistakes that were made on Mars. So, yeah, really, really interesting, really enlightening passage.
It is, and I'm definitely getting echoes of racism and white supremacy culture in here. The idea that this race was better than the race that was perhaps here originally when they came here. And they did mention Africa specifically. And boy, you can
Absolutely.
really see the carryovers after that, including first and foremost the whole enslavement of people with
Absolutely.
black and brown skin. So carries over to many different parts of the world, I think. Michael, any thoughts, reflections?
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. That perhaps there was already some type of built-in animosity in that area where, there was going to be a repeat, not at the level of Mars, but that there was bound to be something there. But we've seen it all over the world too. So, I guess what I'm trying to say is, I guess in that area we can see some animosity in between several different groups, but it was all over the world too. It was in other areas. It wasn't just Mars that completely brought it here. The energy was already there in other areas too.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we didn't say it here, but in other channelings with Quo, they have said there are the majority of Earth's population is made up of people who came from planets that were either rendered uninhabitable like Mars or blew themselves to pieces like the planet they called Maldek, which apparently is what the asteroid belt was before it was an asteroid belt, and many other planets before that. So I think that's one of the things that I appreciate most about the Law of One. It really helps explain things in a way. It explains a lot of things in the world that really don't seem to make a lot of sense otherwise. And if you've ever thought of people who seem like they're from another planet, it's like, oh, okay, well, they really literally are another planet. That actually makes a whole lot more sense now. And if they came from planets that actually blew themselves up, planets where the population, as they said, just had a toxic disregard for their home environment and were unable to grasp the need for inner peace and to harmonize with others, then yes, that would explain so many things that we see happening in the world where people can't seem to be able to agree on things that we just thought were basic, that everyone could agree on. It's fascinating to me. Does anybody have any other thoughts on anything else here?
thought too, one more thought in, that the fact that like Mars, as I said, was not a very comfortable planet, but Venus was also not very comfortable, and that actually made them a tighter community. So the fact that the conditions are difficult can take you either way. Everything is a choice.
Indeed. It is fascinating to me that in Greek and Roman mythology, Mars, the planet Mars, is associated with war, and the planet Venus is associated with love. And yes, we've seen the war and bellicosity part of the planet Mars here, and folks who have read the Ra Contact know that the population of Ra originally came from Venus, and they had a very harmonious transition from second to third to fourth and fifth up to sixth density. They did not seem to have the same hang-ups with love that we do here in sexuality and everything. So here we are on Earth, caught between the planets of war and love. That's a fascinating juxtaposition, one could say. Anyone else have any other thoughts, reflections on anything from this passage before we take a look at another one? I really find it fascinating, this part here on the screen. I think this is the only channeling session I've seen, and I've read hundreds of them, at least 400, maybe 500 different channeling sessions. This is the only one I've seen where they have said that the Martian population was transplanted specifically to the Middle East and parts of Africa first, and then spread out from there. But they are talking about that particular area and the religions associated with that area. So I did want to go on to the next part of this session, where they talk a little more specifically about Islam, Christianity, and Judaism in particular. This is from the same session. And Quo says, "You will note that these entities comprise the bulk of those who believe in one God. The upside in the belief in one creator is that it is closer to that mystery of the creator than the solution which posits many gods. It is our understanding that all things are one, and the infinite creator is as single as its universe and creation. The downside in believing in one God is that belief that only if you believe in that one God and believe in a certain way shall your soul reach heaven. This creates a bias within the religious and oftentimes the political mind of those who so believe that there is their way, or the highway, as this instrument would put it. You will note that in the Muslim church, the Christian church, and in the Church of the Jews, that there is a strong tendency to exclude certain of their members who do not believe specifically in the points of dogma in which they hold to be true. The tendency of this energy of belief in one God, then, has its challenging aspects when it comes to using that religion as a springboard for the lessons of love. If you will examine the writings that are at the very heart of any of these three religions, you will find a mystical understanding of unity that is very similar between those three churches. However, for the entity that is living an everyday life, the tendency with dogmatic churches is to be very exclusionary and judgmental, so that an entity is told basically, either you believe the way we believe, or you are consigned to one of the circles of hell after you are dead, and then feel that it is permissible and even desirable to proselytize and attempt to create that bias within those whom they meet. This nest or web of actions is basically the end result of the Guardians 75,000 years ago, making too many improvements on physical vehicles and creating pride and arrogance as a birthright of the new and improved human species. You may still see these energies playing themselves out in your Earth world at this time. Indeed, we do. Yeah, and as somebody who has studied many, many different world religions and philosophies and spiritual paths over the last 40 plus years, this is one thing that I really appreciated most about the Law of One when I discovered it, not that long ago, only about 4 years ago, that they really did say very clearly that this is not a religion and there's no one way to God. I really like the understanding and the affirmation that all religions, all spiritual paths have some element of truth to them, and they all lead to the Creator, and it's not up to anybody to tell anybody else how they should do it. Each person can find their way. Each person will find their own way back to Creator eventually. Something I've always appreciated about the Law of One. Grace, did you have any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Yeah, I love that you said that. And I think it was a channeling from Hatan who said that everyone's on a path, but the religion that you choose could be seen as a walking stick to help you along that path. And each entity picks up, a different walking stick that resonates with them. And in the end, it's all the same thing. We're all coming back to that one infinite creator. So I love that you said that. That was really beautiful. Um, when I was looking at the passages, I made a note here. You know, I think I like that they talked about the positives and the negatives of these monotheistic religions that have come about, because you can really see, there are good things and there are bad things. But when it comes to the belief in one God, I think that that creates initially this giant distortion of separation. We are worshiping this entity that is outside of ourselves. And I think that that in itself just makes people real confused from the get-go. And I found that very confusing growing up in, Christianity here in the US. Um, Another thing was um, when we look at these religions, and Quo mentions in this channeling that they exclude folks who are, tend to have this exclusionary kind of criteria. It's very confusing because the writings say that we aren't to judge. God judges, but then we're judging. So it's this really confusing kind of thing happening. Those are my thoughts, though.
For sure. Yeah, appreciate that. And yeah, judgmentalism really does seem to be a big part of this and a big part of the problem for sure. Michael, any thoughts, reflections on anything?
Yeah, reading through these passages, I thought it was really interesting just when speaking on the Guardians. And they say how they made certain improvements which allowed to pride or they allowed to arrogance. And nowhere here does it say anything about they were mistaken or they shouldn't have, or, honestly, everything that's happening and is happening is more about experience. Not about, oh, we made a mistake, we'll do it different next time. Everything in here is just about experience. I just thought that was very interesting how it doesn't say anything about mistakes or anything like that. It's just more about different ways of experiencing and how an entity might choose to experience and deal with all these things that are coming up.
That's an interesting way to look at it, and it's a good point because it certainly seems like a mistake to me or a judgment error or
Yes.
something. But I guess you could say, well, we probably would not be where we are today, for better or worse, I guess,
For better or
if
worse.
not for that little experiment. And it's funny. There's so many like cartoons, like from the far side, about picturing the Earth as like a science experiment for aliens or something. And I think in many ways it really is true. I think in so many ways Earth has been very much a biology experiment, and so many things have been tried here. Just, I guess, like you say, to learn and to learn from whatever happens. That's well said. Renat, any thoughts, reflections?
Yeah, I thought about something to share, but I wanted to respond to Michael, and it's a really good point you made because what's the point of judging? You can't go back in time and change things, and if you would have, probably you made the same choice. So it's really about going forward and making the best of what you have. This is on a this global guardian level, but also personal level. But talking about the big experiment that Earth is, and how the Law of One explain things that puzzled us. So I grew up in Israel. Most of my life I haven't lived here, but I did before I left for the U.S. In the early 90s. In the 80s, I lived in Jerusalem for 5 years, and it was intense. And then and later on, when I visited Jerusalem, I also wondered how come, then the old city of Jerusalem, which is a tiny piece all those three religions that are mentioned are invested, their most holy places are right there, sometimes right on top of each other. And that explains that, if they were, they all wanted to huddle together or attracted to the same point of reference. It I don't know. I'm thinking about it as I speak because this is a new thought, but it's like an experiment within an experiment within an experiment of, okay, let's put the Mars people in the Middle East, and then they all kind of competed for the best spot, which happens to be in the old. I think it's like 1 square kilometer, which is less. A kilometer is less than a mile, so your yard is probably bigger. So in the old city, you see those very different religions and very different cultures huddled together, sometimes compete, but mostly, they live together. It's really fascinating. It could be light and love, and it could be war and separation, but this spot is really, there's something there, this magnetic force that all of the competitive Martians dash to that spot to make a stake. That's my thought.
Yeah, well, it kind of goes back to what Grace was saying, I think, about each of these religions in their most conservative form being very exclusionary as opposed to unifying. And instead of being inclusive, it's all about being exclusive, and how in so many ways they're all worshiping one God, and one could say it's the same God, and yet they're each looking at it from slightly different views that somehow makes other views look inferior in comparison. There's a really funny cartoon that I've seen that I thought it was too good to not share here. So if you don't mind, I wanted to. Oh, where is it? Oh, this one. The rabbit god and the duck god. I don't know if you guys have seen this before. I'm guessing there's at least a few people watching this video have seen before, but yeah, you can see there's two armies amassed against each other preparing to do battle, and they're carrying the banners for their countries. And the caption says, "There can be no peace until they renounce their rabbit god and accept our duck god." It's the same god. It is just different ways of looking at it. Any
Jonathan,
other? Yeah.
I have a thought to think. I had recently been engaging in the Baha'i faith, which is a faith that's come out of Persia. And the Baha'i faith says that, all gods are one. And so I thought, it was very progressive for its time. I think that Baha'u'llah was around in the 1800s. So really, I mean, what he was saying then was crazy. And I think it's interesting though that it's from Persia in this very specific area that all of these things are happening. So I thought that was worth mentioning.
It is. Yeah, I appreciate your sharing that. I've heard of the Baha'i faith, and I had the impression that it was very inclusive, unlike so many of these other religions, but that's about as much as I know about it. Is there anything more you can tell us about it that would be helpful to know?
Yeah, so the Baha'i faith essentially says all religions are talking about the same God. You know, all are one, and it really talks about progressive values like social justice, uniting the community. A lot of Baha'is are in the community and helping out, and that really resonated with me. That's why I've been engaging every Sunday and learning more about the faith. It's been great.
Oh, that's beautiful. I did not know that. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Anybody else have anything they wanted to share before we look at another passage? Sounds good. I wanted to look at the next part of this same session where we talk a little bit about what can we do about all of this. Quo says, "What are those of Mars doing these days? As the one known as Jay said jokingly earlier, they are running your countries, parking your cars, taking care of your children, and doing every other human thing you can think of. For there are millions and millions of those who came from Mars. They are, as are all of those within third density at this time, striving to learn the lessons of love. Many of those who came from the red planet have earned the right to graduate into fourth density. They have achieved that shift in consciousness from fear to love, from war to peace, from doubt to faith, and from despair to hope. There is no stigma in being from Mars any more than there is a stigma to anyone for being born of a certain genetic heritage. It is not that the physical vehicle that you inhabit is unimportant. It should be honored, respected, and loved, for it has given its life so that you and your consciousness may walk the planet and learn the lesson that you came here to learn. It is that body whose hands reach out to do the service you would do for your fellow being. It is that voice that sings the praises of the one infinite creator. Without your body, you would be unable to have incarnation. At the same time, it is not well to identify entirely with the body that carries you about. For the body that is carelessly used and not justly appreciated will tend to wish to rule over the mind and spirit. It has strong instincts, not because of genetic changes, but because of the inherent second density heritage. It wishes instinctually to mate, to form a clan for family, to gather resources so that the clan may live, and to protect those resources and, if necessary, defend them to the death. We may note that in our humble opinion, some of the actions of your governments at this time fall solidly under the influence of those instincts. You are at the end of your third density, moving into that time of graduation. Those who do not choose to graduate will necessarily fall back to the instincts to late second density as they prepare to start another third density cycle elsewhere. We would ask each of you with a resonance with the history of those of Mars, do you wish to take a leap forward, to wake up from the dream of hostility? If so, then you have every necessary capacity and have probably already made the choice to turn your back on violence and negativity and to choose love as your expression, your being, and your goal. We encourage you to trust yourself and to give all that you have into making this shift. It is not too late. The decision to choose love is a matter of a heartbeat. Each decision to choose love is a matter of a heartbeat. So poetic and so beautiful. And again, just have to remind the viewers who maybe are new to the Law of One that all of this stuff came through the process of channeling. And it certainly wasn't read as quickly as been reading it. It came out slowly, one word, one sentence at a time, as the channel was trying to pick up on what was being sent to them. But yeah, there is a lot to unpack in here, and I think maybe the most one helpful thing is noting that in spite of everything that we've said up to this point about Mars, there's no stigma from coming from Mars, and that many have made the graduation to fourth density from there. But they do talk a little bit about not identifying too much with your physical body, because our physical bodies really do come from our great ape ancestors, as said, and it has been part of the genetic instincts of that great ape body to have what we would call tribalistic instincts. They can think of service to others in terms of thinking of their own family or thinking of their clan, but they're easy to anger or go to war against anyone who might seem to be a threat to their family or to their clan. And this is something I think we can see many times playing out in the world around us. People fighting for diminishing resources and hoarding diminishing resources and being willing to fight to the death to anyone who is perceived as a threat. This is what we're being challenged to overcome, to be able to see the Creator and others and ourselves, and to recognize that enough to be able to care about others just as much as we care about ourselves. Michael, any thoughts, reflections on any of this?
Yeah, wow. Yeah, definitely. I would absolutely agree that there are those in power that would have us perceive that resources are diminishing, like food is scarce and things like that. If all this negativity, all this war we have going on in the Middle East, other areas too. We had Ukraine and Russia. There's no doubt in my mind that there is a power behind that. It's not the people. People want to be home with their families. People don't want this. The average person doesn't want this. I don't think it matters which side you're on. And I do believe those in power are pushing more of this as much as they can in this diminishing energy of war, which I do believe is diminishing. And I think one day you'll try to set up a battlefield and nobody will show.
Yeah, indeed.
You know, that's the goal, right? I mean, that's what we really want.
There was a bumper sticker about that, like back in the 70s, I think. What if they had a war and nobody showed up?
Nobody ever showed up. And yeah, no, but I do believe that those of negative influence, you know, that power is diminishing. But they're the ones that push this more than anything else.
Agreed. Yeah, and it'd be worth noting that our friends in the Confederation have said that our planet's graduation process is different from most. Earth is a very abnormal planet going through a very difficult time of graduating, mainly because, they said, so many in our population came from other planets that blew themselves up. So we're kind of in this continual tug of war between, as you're suggesting, the majority of the population really leans towards service to others. They want to live in a world of love and peace and unity. But there is a much smaller but not insignificant portion of the population which in fact is trying to graduate on the service to self path, and really would love nothing more than for Earth to be a world of perpetual fear and war and separation. So it would be fair to say the entities in charge of our governments generally service to self. Yes,
Right.
that is part of their agenda, to keep us in a perpetual state of war and fear so that we never have the time to think about deeper meanings of life and about being of service to others. But that is why we're doing these podcasts, and that is why we're doing these episodes, to help raise awareness of that. Renat, any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Yeah, I want to refer to what you said, keeping us in perpetual standby. I feel it now in Israel. You know, there was this expectation that Iran will bomb us for the second time. And it didn't happen. But you know how many events were canceled and flights were canceled and life was brought to a halt because it's going to happen. You know, we have to hide. And that's where this, pressing on this instinctual physical fear, you are in, it's not theoretical, you are in danger, things will blow. And I think, yeah, that's when you're put in fear, the thing you're afraid of might never happen, but you are at their mercy, because fear is a great tool of manipulation. But I also thought about, we're speaking about grand scale war, but there's the war of small scale, within your family, within yourself, within your community. That might be more of our daily experience. And then the question is, okay, we chose to be of service to others. How do we do that? Because I don't have the power to stop the war in the Middle East. I wish I did. I would push the button yesterday. But what can I do? First of all, is to do the inner work to keep myself from being dragged into, maybe I'm not going to be dragged into hate and revenge, but I will glance at my suitcase and say, maybe it's the time to, get out of here. Or maybe, I can use this adversity, this catalyst, to do the work. So I can graduate to wherever I want to graduate. I'm not sure. So, you can see it both ways, as a challenge, as a curse, or as a blessing, as an opportunity. But if you want to choose the opportunity in it, you have to make the choice of every minute to smile when people are not nice to you, to step back when somebody is walking into your space, to be gentle, and it's hard. It's really hard. I had great training in Buddhism and living out of Israel for many years, but that's I think we can start with that, to remind ourselves and whoever is watching it that the choice of not war, and yes, love comes from, let's start with a very smallest scale, and then, it will spread. So that's my thought.
Yeah, well said. I think Quo has said many times that that is basically the purpose of third density, to make it really difficult for you to choose love over fear, because there are so many things that seem to be biased towards a negative world. But for you to be able to see all of that and still choose love instead of fear instead, that shows real faith and real will for sure. And as I think you have noted many times before, there are higher density entities who feed on vibrations of love. They love the love that we radiate, and it's nourishing them. It's food for them. And likewise, for higher density entities on the negative path, they feed on vibrations of fear, vibrations of anxiety, vibrations of war. So just like you said, making the choice in this sense is like choosing not to feed those entities that feed on fear, but on love instead. Grace, anything to add? Any thoughts, reflections?
Yeah, I just wanted to really take a second to honor Renat's life path and life journey living in Israel and taking on, really embodying this positive polarization. And like you said, choosing to stay there and deal with that catalyst. I mean, that is beautiful, really beautiful. And I just wanted to share that thought. But also, Renat, you really spoke about something so poignant, is this constant feeling of war within ourselves, these interpersonal values, like every day, these small things that are happening. And Quo, speaks about it in several channelings, that is the balance, that we are here to embody and embrace. And these constant small things, that's the small things add up. That's what it's all about. It's all about the small things. I really love that you brought that up. Jonathan, was Jay you in this passage? Was that you?
No, it was not. I have
Oh,
actually asked some questions, and I have actually sat in on 3 different channeling sessions, but those were all within the last 2 or 3 years, and this was well before that. But
gotcha.
thanks for
No, sorry.
asking. I wish I was. This would have been a great
Right?
session to sit on.
I remember in a few that I read, Jay was Jonathan. So no, the timeline, but yeah, I was just wondering. But my thought was, when you read this, speaking of all of these, war and going back to that second density, our bodies kind of want to protect, defend, get all the basics. It really spoke to me about masculine qualities. And I think about our society nowadays and how we're so freaking heavily masculine, and how we are kind of moving into embracing this divine feminine energy and bringing balance into it. It goes back to Renat's, like what Renat said, is just, you know, finding balance.
Well said. Thank you for reminding us. That is such a big deal. And that was actually the title of one of our previous episodes on divine feminism. The need for balancing male and female energies is something that seems to be really needed at this time. Thank you so much for the reminder. Anybody else have any thoughts, reflections on anything before we take a look at another session, I believe?
You know, when I look at a military structure, honestly, the structure itself is very masculine, but it's also a very negative power structure in that you know your place. Not negative thing, but negative power structure, in that you know your place and you know where you belong and you know who you have to answer to. But even through war, and I can't remember if it was Ra or Quo that had said it, but they had said that even in war, that there are ways of great polarization, either to the positive or to the negative. You can see soldiers that would martyr themselves for what they consider their best friend. They'll go martyr themselves for that person, and in that there can be great polarization towards service to other. I just thought it was important to bring that up too, because war, it doesn't always serve a negative purpose all the time. I think now we're finally losing the energy for it, and thank goodness for that. But back in the past, there was ways of polarization. It did serve purposes, polarizing us.
Yeah, well said. I think I remember that session that you were alluding to, that they did say there are some good things that can come from war. But otherwise, I mean, I'm just reminded of how often, anytime you watch TV or movies, that violence is automatically the default solution. Anything that is a problem, generally some sort of aggressive and or violent solution is the one that's there. And
We seem
we
to push
always make heroes out of the people who fight in wars. And to my knowledge, we don't have any holidays where we actually honor peacemakers other than Martin Luther King Day. But I mean, we have so many holidays that are based on war and veterans, and the military can't really go to a football game without having to have military parts of the ceremony there. And not that it's a bad thing, it's just that I think it is part of the conditioning, the mental programming that we begin to glorify the military and violence and war and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah, Grace.
Final thought. Yeah, I'm sorry. I had a final thought. Kind of bouncing off what Michael just said is that like looking at the military, you know your place. That's a very negatively oriented thing. And I think actually recently, the most recent LNL channeling that just came out here around the gathering, they had just said that the empire, that's what the empire does. You know, you have this hierarchical order, and it's very reminiscent of that. When we're speaking about like society, I think about the Latin term teleo. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it. T-A, don't not spelling. Teleo. It's the idea of an eye for an eye. That's what we see in our legal system. That's what we're moving away from. You know, that's the old. We're done with that. We don't need to hurt other people. We don't need to have death penalties. We don't need to do these things anymore. We are moving towards this, you know, fourth density, love and understanding and acceptance.
Well said. Yeah, a hallmark of service to self societies is order, like Nazi Germany, you could say. Say what you will about Nazi Germany, but I believe their trains ran on time or some shit like that. I don't know. But it is about control. It's about control over others, and very strict authoritarian hierarchies are very much a hallmark of that structure. And I would say religion is a big part of it. We, made a big deal out of talking about Islam and Christianity and Judaism, and how religion so often in our culture today is used as a shield to defend wars, or as a cover for people to do really not service to others things, but say, well, it's God's will, or God is on our side, so we must be the right team.
Just today,
Any other?
hundreds and
Yeah,
hundreds
go
of
ahead.
years. Not just today, but for hundreds and hundreds of years, they've been using religion as a cover.
For sure, thousands. Yeah,
Thousands.
Renat?
Yeah, I wanted to. I don't know if I'm the only one who has actually served in an army, despite myself. And my service was not hard at all. Really, I was privileged, but knowing the order, and I think every society, even if you look at, let's say, Native American, and there's an order, and because otherwise there's chaos. The difference is in the army, you could be punished. And for me, the most frightening thing is that my freedom will be taken away. You could be grounded, put in jail. And that's, as an 18-year-old, all you have is freedom. You don't really have anything else. You just graduate from high school, and all you have is your freedom to walk about and do whatever you want. And then you're in uniform, and and even if you're and I was in a privileged environment, but still, I knew my place, and I knew that if I'm not doing it, there's not going to be a comfortable conversation. Perhaps depends who the commander was. Sometimes it was a nice conversation, but if the commander was nasty, then yeah, I was grounded. Towards the end of my service, I was grounded once a week, I think. And for me,
yeah, you look like somebody who would get grounded a lot.
For nothing, just the last commander of the squadron was just this nasty man. Yeah, well, I must say, it might please you, Jonathan, that I would escape. I would go out. You had to come back 6 a.m. to sign something, so I make sure that. So I would take shady rides in the middle of the night. It was crazy, but I refused to be enslaved. That to me was a no-no. I never stayed. I never stayed. So I took risks just to clarify to myself that I'm a free person. And yeah, it was, looking back, it was idiotic, but it was very clear to me that in my head, I am free. In reality, I wasn't, but in my head, I'm a free bird. And
That's great. Yeah, that's a great story. And it made you very much who you are today, I'm assuming.
I think I was like that from the beginning because in kindergarten, I was put in a new school and at 10 a.m. I decided I'm done. And I went home crossing a busy street, giving my mother a heart attack. But yes, I was like that always and got in trouble often. And
Am I remembering correctly, Renat, that Israel has mandatory military service, that every citizen of Israel has to serve in the military for X number of years?
That is correct. Now it's more lenient. Maybe they have too many people, so it's easier to get out somehow. But back then, no, you had to either declare insanity, which I considered, or be if you're a religious woman back then you could have escaped, but I wasn't. And if you declare religion and they follow you and they see that you're not religious, then you go to jail. So, yeah, it was
Wow, the church police.
22, few catch-22s around you, but I did at 17, when you start the process, I did ask myself, am I going or not going? Because I thought, although I'm not sure what my choice is, if I decide I'm not going, but I have to have a good choice, a good moral choice, then I will find a way. I don't care if they think I'm insane. Probably I am. So, but I thought about it deeply, and I decided that it's not fair that I will go and my peers will go to the army. That was my conclusion after deep thought, and I did go and I did suffer. And yeah, I mean, the repercussions of serving in the army because of being taken my freedom haunted me for many years.
I appreciate your sharing that. And I definitely have a lot of respect for countries that do have mandatory service. I think if this country required everyone past age 18 to serve, like 2 or 3 years in the military, I'm guessing we'd have a lot fewer wars, or people would find more ways to get out of it. Why don't we go ahead and take a look at another session? This is everything we've read so far came from that one session. There was another session that happened on July 31st in 2007. The question was, there are many pious teachers and creators in Muslim, Hebrew, Christian traditions who pray night and day in the Palestine region. I believe they all pray for peace and love. Why are there still conflicts and wars raging in Israel and nearby regions? This really does bring up a good question of, do prayers for peace make a difference? And here Quo said, my brother, the prayers, hopes, and dreams of those who visualize peace in the Middle East, and indeed in all regions of your war-torn globe, are very effectual in a certain way. They are not designed to intervene in the world affairs of entities who do not wish to become aware of the love and light of the one infinite creator. They are designed to alert the consciousness of the universe, of all creation, and especially of those forces of unconditional love who are the objects of these prayers, to the fact that there is distress among the nations, distress in people's hearts, and a yearning for peace, beauty, truth, and life lived in compassion, comradeship, and contentment. These prayers are having the effect of awakening the planet at the grassroots level of ordinary people. Many are awakening at this time because of the fervent prayers of all of those who offer their deepest beseechments to the one infinite creator in their own ways. Metaphysically speaking, your planet is in far better shape to meet the time of harvest than it was 30 or 40 years ago because of efforts within religious circles and within circles that are not religious, but spiritual or metaphysical, such as this group. All is well, metaphysically speaking. There is no prayer that is not heard by the one infinite Creator. We also have heard the prayers of your people, and that is why we are attending you who live on planet Earth at this time, and responding when there is a way to respond, with our every effort to provide you with our humble opinions as regards the nature of spiritual evolution. The governments of your people, however, are not at all focused on peace, contentment, or compassion. Those in political power have become able to hold the positions they hold because they have laid aside what they consider to be naive and overly innocent hopes. They have accepted that they cannot be men of complete integrity in the usual sense if they wish to serve the state. The organization and arrangement of power is specifically used upon planet. Vibrating in green ray and blue ray, attempt most sincerely to change the atmosphere in which at the level of nation states. However, these entities are either weeded out completely by their inability to accept a system which is corrupt and to work within that, or they have become useless in terms of making a change from within in a self way, while rationalizing to themselves that all that they do is for the greater good. More separated from any stream of pure metaphysical integrity by their own choices until they can no longer remember what it feels like to make a purely positive response to challenging catalyst. Really fascinating passage, and there's more to read after this, but there's a lot to unpack here, and I really wanted to look at this. Again, for folks who are new to the Law of One, couple of things for clarification. We've talked a lot about service to others and service to self, and as we mentioned before, that is kind of the whole point of third density, to make a choice. You're either going to commit to the path of service to others, which means you're going to think of others at least as much as yourself, at least maybe 51% think of others more than yourself, or the path of service to self, which means you're only going to think of yourself. You only see the Creator in yourself and not in anyone else, which means in order to graduate or to be harvested to fourth density, you have to be thinking about yourself 95% of the time and not ever think about the welfare of others more than 5% of the time. It's a difficult grade to make either way, and apparently, according to Quo, most people get stuck somewhere in between and never reach the graduation mark for service to others or service to self. But the harvest that they referred to is the time at the end of the 75,000 year cycle. The whole planet, the whole population has a chance to graduate to either service to self or service to others in fourth density. But yeah, a lot of here about how, I like the part at the beginning about how prayers really aren't meant to change the minds of government leaders who have no interest in service to others' concerns. It's really more about spiritual awakening at the grassroots level and sending out a distress call for those on the inner or outer planes to respond to. Renat, you have any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Yeah, I think that one can or has to, if they're interested in peace, to ask what peace means to them. What is this? It's kind of abstract, we all talk about it, but what does it mean in actuality? And of course, there are answers to that question, but I think those of us who pray or meditate or send energy, if we have this commitment to whatever image we have that is positive and made of love, then that's what we need to cultivate. It could be small, it can be medium, it can be big, but yeah, it's really hard to make a huge difference. It starts with a small difference, and the difference is in us, in our community. We can go as small as we can or want, and as big as we want. there was a time that when a few months ago that I thought I'm gonna just be brave enough and go into the negative entities that are um, the puppeteers of all the crazy leaders we see, and like, what's the point of their action? They're destroying us. Just went in there and sent them love and greetings, and it was hard. It was really hard, and I could do it only for a certain time before it was just too hard. But that, like, I took it on because, I'm anxious about what's going to happen. If we talked about Mars, then and other uh, entities from other planets that have self-destructed in some way, if they're here, what's the future of planet Earth? It's worrisome. So not going into anxiety, that will resolve nothing. Just doing our little bit of helping. And yeah, there are many entities that could help us in our mission of peace and love, but we have to call upon them because um, they will not come otherwise because of the,
Free will. Yeah.
Yes, they will not infringe on our free will. So activate them, do whatever, we can do whatever we can to propel forward in a positive way. Those are my.
Well, I appreciate how what you're saying kind of goes back to what you said earlier, I think, about doing the inner work. That, as you said, I mean, no one person here can end all the wars in the Middle East or anywhere else. That's just beyond any of our capacity to do. But Quo has said more than a few times, if you want to change the world, the best way to change the world is to change yourself. And if you want to heal the world, then you got to be willing to do that difficult inner work that you're alluding to heal the traumas and the hurts within and to forgive those who you're having a hard time forgiving. When you do that, that really does change the world in a metaphysical way more than anything else one can do. And that's super important, I think. Grace, any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
Yeah, just kind of reflecting on what you and Renat just said about, change happens within. I used to believe that we could kind of force people to be good and then we'd have a better society, but that's not how it works. It's just that's not how it works. You can never force anyone. They have to be ready. And honestly, this first paragraph it just lights me up. I love this because before I found the law of one, I kind of thought prayers were bullshit. You see all these people praying, nothing's happening. I'm kind of like, what is this actually doing? What is this accomplishing? But now that I have read the law of one and have read the subsequent channelings from the LL team and reading this right here, it lights me up. I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, beseech the creator. Yes, like you have to have your intention there. You have to really, mean it. And it's not for us to change what we see. That's not the point of prayer, which I think is kind of a muddied concept. We pray and we expect things to change, but that's not necessarily what prayer is for. We're praying for others and what the powers that be, let's just say, to help out. It's this general concept, not so much specifically praying for these very tiny things necessarily, but to pray for betterment of all. And it feels so freaking good to read this and see like, wow, prayers do help. Metaphysically speaking, we're better off. So I love that.
That's so beautifully said. As always, really appreciate that. I think it reminds me of something our friend Morris has said at least once or twice in our study groups, which is that prayer isn't really for other people to change. Prayer is for you to change, to change the way you look at it or the way you feel about it. And I think that's another way of saying what you just said. It's beautiful. And you know what? I left a number of spiritual groups because I kind of went through the same process as you did. It's like, all you guys do is prayer. I'm not really seeing you doing anything about it. And I just thought the prayers seemed to be useless. But like you, when I discovered the law of one and discovered that, oh, prayers do make a difference, just not in the way that I thought they did. Kind of changes everything. What do you think, Michael? Any thoughts, reflections on anything?
What can you continue on with what Grace was saying, because it was yeah, just really profound. That's what it is too. It's the prayers. It's the small acts of unconditional love and kindness. You can't meet evil, or what's perceived as evil. You can't meet it with a greater power. It's those small acts that we do every day, the unconditional love and kindness with no thought of anything in return. And that's how you meet it. And that's what starts changing. And it does start small, but once that snowball gets rolling, it can't be stopped.
Well said. Yeah, and this would probably be a good time to put in a plug for the Gaia meditations, if you don't mind. For those who are not familiar with this, it started about 20 some years ago, shortly after the 9/11 attacks, that Carla and Jim asked Quo for what they could do to help bring peace to the world. And one thing that was suggested was having group meditations or prayers for world peace. So they actually started this about 20 some years ago, and they have been doing it pretty much every day since then. So the Gaia meditations happen daily around 6:30 p.m. Eastern time. If you go to the L&L Research website, click on Connect, scroll down to the bottom of the page, you'll see the Gaia meditation thing here. And if you go to the next sentence below the part that I circled in yellow, there is a link that you can use to do a time zone converter to see what time zone that would be for you. But yeah, that's something that we do every time in our Zoom groups. We do a 20-minute Gaia meditation together for world peace, for healing for Mother Earth, for smoother transition to fourth density. We do it for about 20 minutes, but one could do it on their own, and you could do it for 15 minutes, you could do it for 5 minutes, you could do it for 1 minute. I've taken to setting my alarm on my phone to go off at 3:29. That's what time it would be for us over here. So I'm always annoyed when I hear it because I'm in the middle of doing something much more cool and fun and interesting than that. But I've gotten the habit of stopping, and sometimes it's just for a minute or two, but I'll just stop. And sometimes I'll sometimes I'll do square breathing. Sometimes I'll just send loving thoughts to Mother Earth and send thanks and ask for help from our angelic friends and the Confederation, or all of angelic beings who love this planet as well, to help Mother Earth. And just send loving thoughts rather than thoughts of fear and despair. So that is the plug for the Gaia meditations. Any other thoughts, reflections on anything here before we continue on? Yeah, not?
Okay, I can actually speak. Yeah, just to piggyback on what you said about the Gaia meditation, I assume the intention here is to have any number of people at the same time sending prayers, and there's power in that, of this law of multiplication or something.
Law of squares. Yeah.
Yeah, but yes, but if you do it at the same time, but for us who, for me, that's not a reasonable hour. I'll have to get up in the middle of the night. But I heard this theory, and I forget to do it, but I should remember, that when we pray on our own, meditate, send love to Gaia, to all the war-inflicted areas, then we could imagine that we are joining our prayer to the prayers of others, because at the same time on this planet, probably there's at least one or two people that are sending prayers of the same texture, the same energy, probably more. You don't know them, but you can metaphysically connect to them, and then the law of squares will work as well, and you don't feel so alone, because it can be a very lonesome mission.
Well said. Yeah, I appreciate your saying that, Because that would be a really good question for anybody to ask, whether it makes a difference if you're actually doing it at the same time as everybody else. And I would agree with everything that you just said. In some ways, I think it does make a difference when everyone is doing it at the same time. There is what's called a doubling effect or a law of squares. But I think it's also equally true that it really doesn't matter, because Quo has said many times that time is really an illusion. And if you are there's never a bad time to be praying for Mother Earth. And I believe, like you said, those prayers are added on whether they're at the same clock time or not. So I would encourage everyone to do it at some point. Grace?
Just wanted to share a thought that I had when I first kind of came across this material, and maybe other people think this as well. You don't have to be perfect to send love and send hope and send everything everywhere. We are all just figuring it out. You can still take a moment within yourself and send peace, send love, and you don't have to have it all figured out. I think that's so important, because when I first came across all of this material, I was like, how the hell am I supposed to do this? I'm trying, I'm out here messing shit up all the time. Not a prerequisite. Just have that intention. Just have it and send it.
Again, could not say it any better. The intent is really more important than anything else. Well said. Anybody else have anything they wanted to share on this, Gaia Meditations or otherwise? Really do enjoy that part of our Zoom groups. So do want to encourage anyone who's watching, if you would like to join our Gaia Meditations in person. Yeah, we meet on Zoom 3 to 5 p.m. Pacific time on Tuesdays, and on Saturdays from 8 to 10 a.m. Pacific time. And yeah, a lot of people have said they really enjoy the meditations and feel like it helps, makes a difference. And again, you can join any study group. There's lots of great Law of One study groups out there. Let's see, why don't we go ahead and take a look at the next part of this. This is the same session, just reading on. Indeed, my brother, the entities who are in power among your nation states are focused upon those goals that have been the habitual goals of people in power upon your planet for millennia. These goals are the goals of your great ape ancestors. They revolve around a love of their family and their tribe. When they have defined their tribe, then they attempt to defend their tribe's property and acreage and to gather resources so that their tribe may fare well in a world of diminishing resources. They have been in power before, perhaps many times, and have developed the habit of an unceasing thirst for power. And this they shall not yield in order to make room for service to others' goals, such as true liberty, true equality, true justice, and a truly equitable distribution of the resources of your planet. We ask that you not be overly concerned with the state of the outer workings of your planet. We ask that your concern be to pray that these leaders may be forgiven, for they do not know what they are doing. They will come to dust, as all dragons must. Even now they are dying. The energy of the old world is weakening, and its hold upon the hearts and minds of ordinary people, such as those gathered in the circle of seeking, is lessening every day. Nothing is as it seems when looked at from a metaphysical point of view. Therefore, when thinking of the Middle East and its issues, may your concern be to affirm and confirm that there is peace, love, and compassion that is stronger than the dragon which is thrashing its tail at this time. For dragons shall die, but those values of love, unity, hope, faith, and joy shall live forever. As you affirm and confirm these values in yourself, you are creating the basis for that which is to come. And in so doing, you are creating for yourself the ability to live through the shift into fourth density that is upon you at this time. As you look at the Middle East, know that all is well. And if you wish to explore the details of the politics of violence and aggression that make the front pages red with blood, do this studying and this research not to despair, but to know ever more clearly the nature of the world that you came to incarnation to love. And my brother, we ask that you allow no judgment to enter into this love. Praise and bless those who seem to be persecuting and hurting the common man and woman in these difficult and challenging times that you now experience. Let your mind and your heart rest in peace. The outer world shall not hear you, but all those in the unseen realms who vibrate in unconditional love do hear you and are called to your prayers to amplify them and to strengthen them. You are doing the good work of compassion and love as you offer these simple prayers and visualizations to maximize your ability to serve in this way. We recommend that, as this group does, you set aside time each day, if only just a moment, to visualize peace, harmony, and understanding, not in the Middle East, but in all portions of your far-flung globe. We assure you that you are having a wonderful effect on the inner planes. Allow the rest to fall away, for empires rise and fall. The spiritual evolution moves along without regard to the illusion created by power and breath. Such a beautiful passage and so much to look at here. I really love the image of the dragon, the dying dragon thrashing its tail. That's what it feels like to me, looking at the world just in the last few weeks, months, or a year or so. It feels like that energy is dying, and it feels like that what we're seeing is in many ways a dying dragon thrashing its tail. Doesn't mean that it can't still do damage. It just means good is coming. And what seems like really difficult times now is really just a blip in eternity. And spiritual evolution is inevitable, and this planet will be fourth density positive, thanks to the efforts of so many people like you who are watching this right now, helping in your own way. Grace, do you have any thoughts, reflections on anything here?
I think at the moment, no. I'm just taking that in.
Nice. We can come back to you. Michael, any thoughts, reflections?
Yeah, well, it's the last paragraph, or even just the last couple sentences that really get me. Empires will rise and fall, but the evolution of the spirit, the evolution of the soul, just continues ever onward. And all is well. I keep saying all is well. In all that we're dealing with here, in a sense, we should have some gratitude for all the catalysts that has been allowed, and that allows us to polarize so strongly in whichever way it is we choose to polarize. Yeah, that's really all I have there. But yeah, that last sentence just got me.
It's a beautiful way to look at it, and it reminds me of one of my favorite quotations where they said something to the effect that much about love has been learned from experiencing its polar opposite. And if you remember that the law of one is that all is one, and that one thing is love, the Creator is in everything. The Creator is in all of those people waging war, as well as the people who are dying and being tortured in those wars. It's all a way that Creator learns more and experiences more about the full range of possibilities, from the most light to the most dark, from the most positive to the most negative. And I guess it goes back to this whole little biology experiment that is planet Earth. For sure, the Creator is learning a lot from everything that happens here. And I guess if you can look at it that way, then, as he said, all is well and all will be well. I hope. Renat, any thoughts, reflections?
Yeah, we have to remember, as hard as it might be, that we chose to come here at this time. And, and I chose to come here shortly, or I don't know, when the shit hit the fan in Israel. Shortly before that, I decided it's going to be a good idea to be in Israel, near family after 30 years of wandering the land before I hit my next destination. So did I know it's going to be hell on earth and chaos and dissemination of systems? I didn't really know. I didn't really follow closely the politics. I now understand I was very naive.
You were not aware there was a history of war in the Middle East.
No, not the war. I mean, what's happened in Israel, the dissemination, the systems are falling apart. It's such a different country than the one I left in 1991. And I came for visits, I stayed, I followed the news, but now that I'm actually using the systems and I have comparison to other countries that were not perfect, I see how it's, the dragon, oh my God, the dragon is threshing and threshing here in every direction. But I chose to be born, in this time, which for me it's a lifetime, but in eternity, it's a blip. And we chose to come here at the end of this cycle where everything is accelerated. And before the dragon dies, it's going to, it's going to hurt. It's hurting. It's not, So we chose to do that. And the reasons are complex and maybe unreasonable reasons, but it is a choice. It is a choice. And once we understand it and, we list all the things that are good in our lives, and remember, it's all temporary. We don't have to choose to come here again. If we come from gratitude and see the opportunity in every obstacle and challenge, then I don't know if we polarize either way, but it's all easier to bear all this craziness.
Those are really, really important points to make, and I really appreciate your highlighting that for sure. It really does seem to a lot of people like it really does feel like the end of the world. In a lot of ways, looking around, it feels like the world is coming to an end. And again, from a law of one perspective, you can say, well, because it is. In many ways, the world we knew of in third density is, in fact, coming to an end. And that is, in many ways, the dying dragon thrashing its tail, because it's the way of empires and endless wars that is finally coming to an end. But the end of third density Earth means the birth of fourth density Earth. And it's like the death of a caterpillar is the birth of a butterfly. And to be able to have that reassurance that all is well and all will be well. And that, as you said, everyone here and everyone who's watching this chose to come here in order to help with that, to answer the call for help and help in their own way. And it doesn't have to be some big, great, outwardly visible way that helps. Just your existing, your being, whoever's watching this right now, you're just being alive, you're being existing and having a heart beating means you are holding a space and you're radiating light in your own way. That has helped lightening those earth energies and helping make this transition possible. So thank you to anyone who's still watching at this point for what you do. Anybody else have anything to say before we start wrapping things up?
Maybe a final thought just on this, just to share. What an amazing time to be alive. Can you imagine? Oh my gosh, like I just feel so freaking blessed. Like I just, I'm in the middle of my shit and then it hits me and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm alive. And right now, at this time.
Does this often happen to you in the middle of shit?
It does. But it's a beautiful thing that happens. And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for everyone in this call. I'm grateful for everyone watching. I'm grateful for everything. It is so beautiful. And, and I think just on the screen here, the passage that says, the outer world shall not hear you. It speaks to how your prayers might not seem to be answered in this moment, but things are happening, and that's beautiful.
It is a beautiful thing. Well said. Thank you. Feces, it's a wonderful thing, for sure. Well, this would be part of the episode where we try to wrap this up and take a look at some takeaway lessons, perhaps. Out of everything that you've heard in the last hour and a half or so, here are some things that you might consider as takeaway lessons. For one thing, in case you didn't know this, yes, it would probably be good to remember that many on Earth came from other planets destroyed by war and bellicosity. Not just Mars, but many other planets, which we shall talk about more in future episodes. But yes, it would explain why there's so much war in the Middle East. It would explain why there's always been so much war on this planet. If you're willing to make that leap and believe what we've just read, then yes, there's a lot more to it than you might have thought otherwise. Second lesson, I suppose, would be to choose love over fear. That's been said many times. That is pretty much the whole point of third density, to, in spite of all outward appearances, to believe that love is the way to go rather than fear and war. Third, probably helpful to remember that prayers for peace do in fact work at a grassroots level, and they're not necessarily going to cause wars to end in the Middle East or anywhere else, but you are actually helping more people to go through their own spiritual awakening and to learn how to love over fear on their own just through your prayers. And lastly, that again, in spite of all appearances to the contrary, all is well and all will be well. And just if you want to change the world, just keep being yourself at the deepest level that you can and be a transmitter of that love. Let the love of the Creator flow through you, and whatever way is the way that you do that, that's the best way to bring about peace on earth. Panelists, any last thoughts, reflections on any of this or anything before we have a pop quiz?
I would add to, between your first and second point, is that there are also humans here that are wonders. I believe this is one of the episodes, maybe the first one you've done about wonders. People who came here, entities, souls who were born into human body that came here to help. And at this time, there are millions of us. Some of us are not awakened, but there are. So there's a bit of everything.
For sure. For sure. Yeah, it's amazing to think of how many millions and millions of souls, as he said, that came here as wanderers is the word that they use to answer that call for help and to help in whatever way they can. And yeah, many of them, most of them forget why we're there. They're here. And hopefully somebody who's watching this video might get a little bit of an awakening and might remember why they came here. And that will be a joy to watch and behold. Anyone else? Any last thoughts, reflections? If not, then yes, we do have one more little piece of business to take care of, and that is your pop quiz. As most of our viewers by now probably know, pop quiz was an expression that Carla used to refer to the little tests that we get each day to see if we have learned how to love instead of fear and have learned what we came here to learn. Pop quiz is just something we do like to do at the end of our podcast to add a little bit of fun and levity to our otherwise serious conversations. So panelists, you have no doubt heard much about the Great War known as World War I and World War II. I'm sure you have heard a fair bit about the Vietnam War and the Gulf War and the War on Terror and the War on Drugs. And apparently, according to Fox News, there is even a war on Christmas. But how about the many other weird wars that you've never heard anybody talk about? Today, I'm going to ask you 3 multiple choice questions about 3 weird ass wars that you've never heard of before. See how many you can guess correctly. If you're still watching on video, you can say the answers out loud and we can hear you through the screen. As always, the points don't matter. If you had fun, you won. If you learned something new and interesting, and in this case, weird, then you won as well. Panelists, are you ready for your first question?
Ready.
All right. Your first question is this. Napoleon was once attacked and defeated by a large group of what animals? Was it A, rabbits, B, rats, or C, reindeer?
B.
It was one or more of those animals. Yeah. What do you think, Grace?
What did you
I'm
say,
gonna go
Grace?
for rats.
Rats. Nice.
Yeah, me too. I'm thinking rats because it was a ratty era.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna say C. I'm gonna say C.
Reindeer.
Go with reindeer. They just-
All good guesses. Unfortunately, all incorrect. The correct answer is rabbits. It was worse than the thing in Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Apparently, Napoleon Bonaparte was celebrating the victory in Russia, I believe, and they were celebrating I'm sorry, I'm trying to do this without reading the whole thing. They were celebrating the treaties of Tilsit, which brought about a victorious end to the war between France and Russia, and they wanted to do it with a traditional rabbit hunt. Napoleon's chief of staff arranged the festivities with anywhere from a few hundred to 3,000 rabbits, expected them to behave like normal rabbits when they were uncaged. But unfortunately, rather than run away, the bunnies began swarming Napoleon and his men. Though amusing at first, the situation quickly overwhelmed some of Europe's foremost military strategists. According to General Paul Charles Francois and the rest of that name, the intrepid rabbits turned the emperor's flank, attacked him frantically in the rear, and refused to quit their hold, piled themselves up between his legs until they made him stagger, and forced the conqueror of conquerors, fairly exhausted, to retreat and leave them in possession of the field. Having ceded this crucial territory, Napoleon retreated to his coach and thought the bunnies would show mercy. They did not. With what a historian described as a finer understanding of Napoleonic strategy than most generals, they continued their siege until the coach fled the scene. The reason for the creature's aggression, they thought that tame rabbits brought from the farmer would be not a problem, but because they had not been fed that day, the hungry bunnies swarmed the men that they assumed were there to feed them.
If somebody took the rabbits off, they would be hunted.
I guess. Yeah. Hilarious. You ready for your next question? Whoops. True or false? Australia once declared and lost a war against kangaroos.
It's true.
Probably
I've
true.
seen them fight.
I'm gonna go true.
What do you think or not?
Yeah, probably true. Because yeah, I don't know.
It seems like it would be, but the correct answer is false. It was actually they waged and lost a war against emus. Apparently, back in 1932, they were causing a really big problem eating a lot of crops, and the farmers complained. So much to the extent that the Australian government officially declared wars on emus. Unfortunately, they lost. The emus are still there. Apparently, not as much of a problem as they used to be, but it is the war known as the Emu War. Are you ready for your last question? How long was the shortest war in history? What do you think? Point goes to whoever guesses closest.
It lasted about a day. And it was in the 80s, I think.
Nice. Renat, Grace?
Could guess a week. That's my guess.
Good guess. Renat?
Well, there is the 6-Day War in Israel in the 60s, but that's what comes to mind. That maybe there was a shorter war. I would choose a shorter war, actually, if it's my choice. 10 seconds.
Yeah, 0 would be great, but unfortunately,
But it wouldn't be a war. Yeah, 10 seconds, you go to the battlefield, you say, whatever, you walk away.
yeah, I'm good. Yeah. Interestingly enough, the correct answer is 38 minutes. The shortest war in history lasted 38 minutes.
You need it.
It was known as the Anglo-Zanzibar War, and it lasted about 38 minutes, and it happened in about 1896. So apparently, Zanzibar, which is part of an island just off the coast of Tanzania in Africa, was, of course, ruled by the English colonizers. And apparently, they had installed somebody as a sultan to rule in the best interests of Britain. And when that sultan died, he chose his successor without British approval. And so the British warned him to advocate. The dude refused, and the British began to pound them with artillery. I believe the name of the boats was the HMS Raccoon, Thrush, and Sparrow, fired on the palace, destroying the majority of Khalid's artillery within 2 minutes. And that was more or less the end of that. That's what happens when you try to go against the colonizers. Not sure if the British are not the good guys in this war, I would say. But that is good news that it is the end of our pop quiz for today. Panelists, you did great. I believe whoever got the closest was, what, 1 day or something like that?
Michael is the winner. Although if we say winner, there's a loser, and that's reference to war. So I'm not sure I like that concept either.
That's true when it comes to war.
I'm a pacifist. There's no excuse for war. I can't think
Indeed.
of one.
No. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Panelists, as always, it's been a joy having you here, and appreciate you sharing your thoughts and love and wisdom with our viewers. Did you have anything you wanted to say in the ways of goodbye before we end our podcast? Renat, any last thoughts? Anything you want to say?
I just wanted to remind us to remind ourselves that, the middle of sixth density, game over. So sometimes I when I'm having a hard time, I'm thinking, okay, middle of sixth density, game over, collect the cards, they don't matter, all this suffering and BS, forgotten. So
Game over for service to self, if that's what you mean. Yes.
No. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but the war, the conflict, the battle between good and bad, that's what I mean.
Oh yeah.
That's what I meant. We have to choose this or that, love or fear. At some point, it's all uniting towards love and wisdom and unity and all that good stuff we all want. Even if we are one of those horrible leaders at heart, as Michael said, we all want to sit with our family or somebody else's family and have fun.
For sure. Something to look forward to in sixth density. Grace, anything you want to say for goodbyes?
Yeah, thanks anyone who's watched this long for, engaging with us and personally dealing with my fumbles because gosh damn it. I'm so happy to be here. A huge thanks to Jonathan. He organizes all of this. Beautifully done. So happy to be here.
So happy to have you here. Michael?
Yeah, Jonathan, I just wanted to thank you for having me here today. This has been great. And yeah, that's about it. Pray for peace, not victory. Pray for peace instead.
Nice. You guys, I have to say, you're the best panel I've had yet. And I know I say that to every other panel, but I really mean it this time. You guys are awesome. It's been great. Thank you for being here and look forward to doing it again. Thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. To all our friends at L&L Research, thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. Thank you for whoever's still watching at this point. If you are still watching at this point, you are one of the few. You are one of the elite. You are better than everybody else. Let me tell you that. And thank you for all you've done and continue to do in service to others. We love you much. Till next time. Adonai. Namaste.